Hello everybody, welcome to HSLS3900 Research Methods for Undergrads. My name is Fuh-Cherng. I'm the instructor of this class. Today we will go over the topic, the why, what, and where of research.
Why do we have to do research? The answer is simple. Because research is everywhere. Believe or not, it is everywhere. For example, when you go see a doctor, you hope they give you a correct diagnosis. You hope they give you a correct treatment. Their diagnosis and treatment protocols are based on research results that have to be valid and reliable. Another example, as you know, there is a bridge on Fuh-Cherng River, and I live down south by Richland Avenue, so I have to go over the bridge almost every day, and I take it as granted. I never thought that the bridge would collapse. I always think that the bridge should be there, strong and sturdy. However, as a matter of fact, if the bridge is not designed properly, it could collapse. A third example, let's say you are a runner and you run every day. Then you will need a pair of high-end running shoes. I recommend that because those shoes are healthy and they fit with your feet. It prevents injuries from happening. Those shoes are results of research projects. How to do science? In order to do science, there are three important assumptions we have to agree. The first one is order. Order means that the universe cannot be a complete chaos. I mean, it's just humans, we like to make sense of our surroundings. We like to create orders so we can understand them. The universe could be a complete chaos. However, in order to do science, which is silly, we have to agree upon the assumption that there must be an order. For example, let's say, Dr. Chen, look at your room. It's a complete chaos. You cannot even see where the floor is. It's a big pile and piles of things in your room. And if you ask me, I say, yes, that's right. And if I ask my wife, honey, where's my tie? And she asks me, when was the last time you see your tie? And if I say, yeah, probably yesterday I saw my tie, then look at the top of the pile. On the other hand, if I think, oh, I haven't seen my tie for a long time, look at the bottom of the piles. And wait, that's an order. New items on the top of the pile, old items at the bottom of the pile. So again, the universe may be a chaos. However, human beings are trying their best to make order, create orders in order to understand their surroundings. The second assumption is determinism. It means that any event is determined by preceding events. For example, I walk on the street and I saw a penny on the ground and I pick it up and I wonder, how come the penny is here at this moment for me to pick it up? You can think there must be some preceding events. Someone else likely dropped that coin before me at that location. So that's what we mean determinism. Any event is determined by preceding events. The third assumption is discoverability. That means whatever we are interested in must be measurable by our human sense. I mean, we have 5 senses, right? Vision, hearing, smell, taste, and touch, right? Something like that. So, is there any other perceptions beyond that 5 senses? Of course. I believe there are. It's just we humans are unable to perceive those things. But that doesn't mean those things do not exist, like the Ghostbuster. However, in order to do science, whatever you are interested, you are studying, you have to convert them back into a format that humans can understand. For example, I am a Ghostbuster, and I'm telling you, I saw a ghost last night, and people will ask, show me your evidence. Show me the film or audio files, something like that. I have to convert my evidence of, say, a ghost into something that humans can measure, can discover. When doing science, we are making observations between independent and dependent variables. For example, say I am a naughty boy and I have a ball in my hands. Wow, a ball. So I will throw it on the ground and the ball will bounce. Wow, that makes me happy. And I throw the ball harder. Wow, the ball bounced back much higher. That makes me even more excited. So I throw it even harder. And the harder I throw, the higher the ball will bounce. Until it gets to a point, I throw the ball really hard, it bounce back and break the window of my house. And my mom will yell at me. So that's an observation made by a boy, a naughty boy, Fuh-Cherng. So Fuh just completed an observation for science. He observed the independent variables and dependent variables. The independent variable is how hard he throws the ball. And the dependent variable is how high the ball bounced back. The harder he throws the ball, the higher the ball will bounce back. And also there's a critical point. When he throws it too hard and break the window, some severe consequences would happen. Okay, so this is what we do to do scientific observations. We observe relations or associations between independent and dependent variables. What are the conditions of observation? There are a lot. For example, the observation must be unbiased and independent. And if this observation involves humans, we need to keep confidentiality for the participants. And also, if we want to do a serious kind of a nice experiment, in addition to the experimental condition, we will also need control conditions to make the experiment thorough and sound. What is a relation and association then? We can think of them as an aspect or quality that connects two or more things as being working together. How do you describe a relation or association? For this class, they say if X, then Y. Or you can say X and Y are related. or you can say X and Y are associated. Are we always interested in relations and associations, even causality in CSD research? The answer is yes. We are always interested in relations and associations, even causality. If things are not related, they are not in order. You may argue that, hey, Dr. Juan, what about case studies? They present, say, only one special case. I mean, even when they are presenting a special case, they are still trying to find relations for that special case. Here is the definition of research provided by NIH, National Institutes of Health, the largest research funding organization on Earth. The definition reads, research entails the systematic investigation of some phenomenon or problem with the intent to produce generalizable knowledge. For this definition, I want you to highlight two terms. The first key term is systematic investigation. The second key term is generalizable knowledge. For example, if people ask you, are green apples sour? Then you will have to do a systematic investigation. You will have to sample green apples in Walmart, in Kroger, in all possible grocery stores in Athens, in the state of Ohio, in the United States, and on Earth. So we have to do it systematically. However, as you know, it is impossible to sample all green apples on Earth. As a result, we can only select a small number of samples and use the results from that sample to produce knowledge that can be generalized to the whole population. This is the main purpose of doing research. We are collecting data from representative samples systematically, trying to produce knowledge that is generalizable to the whole population. Next, we will need to identify the problems that we want to work with. The problem can be broad. For example, when Dr. Graham Clark just discovered cochlear implantation in the 60s, it was brand new, a big discovery at that time. And a lot of cochlear implantation was unknown in the 60s. As a result, during that time, people will need to conduct multiple systematic research projects to understand cochlear implantation, to understand a big, broad problem. On the other hand, the problem can be narrow, like laser focused. For example, if you, let's say the digital hearing aids has been evolved and very matured nowadays, you could find a specific question to ask for digital hearing aids that is laser focused. In that case, you will need to clearly specify your methods and procedures to answer that laser focused question. Here is the practitioner and the researcher. You may know that our field, communication sciences and disorders, started as a profession, not scientific discipline. In the early days, for example, a child is delayed in language development. Then the profession will evaluate the child and provide treatment. It starts with as a clinical profession, not scientific discipline. However, because of the advancement of science and clinical professions, the research has been going on more, and it demands scientific documentation. For example, if you are an SLP, you are seeing a child who stutters. Which method would you use on this specific child? And whichever method you use, what are the evidence that support you to choose that method? I mean, these questions are important for the child, for the clinic, and for insurance companies. Because if insurance companies do not take your reason, or if you are unable to provide scientific evidence supporting your choice of that treatment to the child, the insurance company may not pay you, and you don't want that to happen. You want to get paid for your work. So for this reason, the research has become more and more important these days. The third concept is many clinicians may not engage in clinical research. It's a misunderstanding. They may think they are short of training in specific methods. They may believe that research is irrelevant to their practice. However, their practice in the clinic itself is the application of scientific methods. So practitioners and researchers, we are a family. So we should work together, and the clinicians can be researchers at the same time. Hopefully researchers will have clinical license to practice as well. But the two parties should unite and to benefit the participant. Why do we do research then? There are at least 3 reasons. The first one is to build theory. For example, autoacoustic emissions are discovered by Dr. David Kemp in England. Dr. Kemp was actually not a CSD person. He was actually a physicist. In those days, he was just trying to measure the sound waves inside ear canal. He presents sound to human ears and wanted to know how does it look like for the sound in human ear canal. So here I'm going to draw a schematic of his recording. So let me get the pen up. Let's make it blue in color. So let's say this is a recording, and the sound comes in. It will have a very, very high amplitude, and then it will come down, and then like this, and so on and so forth. So this roughly is his recording. Please forgive the ugliness of my drawing. I'm not a good artist, but I try my best. So he will record the sound wave that will be like this, huge in amplitude. That's his target. He was measuring the sound and see how the sound change in ear canal by changing different parameters. You know, great discoveries usually are found by accident, or we should say by careful observation. Let me use a different color, and then see if you can see this. So he noticed one thing here. Do you see a bump here? Yes, you do. So one day he observed, wait, there was a little bump here. What is that? And so he repeat, and it happens again. So in the beginning, he thought it was an artifact. So he conducted many studies trying to make sure that it is an artifact, or what kind of artifact, so he can reduce or remove that artifact. It ends up this little bump is not an artifact. It's an echo coming out of the outer hair cells inside human cochlea. And that was a huge discovery. And I built a theory. You see, this little bump is not an artifact. The theory is it's actually coming out from hair cells in human cochlea. Pretty neat, huh? The second example, the second reason is to describe the nature of communication disorders. I mean, you don't have to be researchers to have great discoveries. There was an ENT doctor. He's not a researcher at all. He was a good doctor. So let me draw something. He has a lot of patients because he is nice, I guess. And let me draw something. So they say he has a male patient. Excuse me. So I'm drawing quite slowly. Sorry. And here is another female patient, and they are husband and wife, and then they have children. And they say they have 3 children, for example, and they say they have a son, a daughter, and another son. Okay? And they say this son married another beautiful girl, and then say this girl married another handsome son, another handsome boy, and they say they all have children. You get the idea of what it's called a pedigree. Is a tree indicating all family members. Okay. So one day he was looking at his patients and he realized, oh, I have several patients who have hearing loss. Let me just say, use this. Shaded them in red, indicate they have hearing loss. They say hearing loss like this, and they say like this, and here, for example. So the red means hearing loss. It's hard. I'm trying to write. Okay, the red symbol indicates hearing loss, for example, and change the color, blue. The interesting thing is he found, wait a moment, within this big family, some members have thick skin disease. They call it palmoplantar keratoma, PPK. It's basically the skin on their palms and soles on the foot. The palms on the hands and the soles on the foot are very thick, super thick. PPK, I'm going to mark it, say, in blue. So they say this person has PPK, and say this person has PPK, and they say this person has PPK, and they say this person has PPK. Okay, and this is a cartoon illustration. Is not 100% accurate. It's just to illustrate the idea that this doctor, an ENT doctor, who is not a researcher, he simply found there are 2 disorders running simultaneously within this big family. So he was very curious. So he went to the library and pulled out a list of genes that are responsible for hearing loss. Thank God for all those researchers in genetics. They have a whole list of genes that are responsible for hearing loss. He also pulled out another list of genes that are responsible for PPK. And guess what? He was super lucky. When he was comparing the 2 lists of genes, he found that there was only one gene that exists in both lists. And that gene, the name of that gene is called connexin 26. I'm writing it in green. My apologies, that green color doesn't stand out too much. So anyway, it's called connexin 26. That was his discovery. He found that the connexin 26 exists simultaneously in these 2 disorders. within the same family pedigree. And guess what? Connexon 26 later was discovered as the main reason for newborn hearing loss. You know, when babies are born, about 2 out of 1,000 newborns have hearing loss. Among those newborns, half of them have deficits in connexon 26 gene. And that's a great discovery because after that, people do genetic screening for newborns. And the third reason to conduct research is to provide effective treatment. And that one should be very obvious. For example, if people do cochlear implantation research, it's trying to treat hearing loss by implementing a cochlear implant in the participant. So these are the three main reasons that we do research in CSD. Where do we do research then? Of course, we can do research in the lab in contrived settings. The benefits of doing research in the lab will be that we can manipulate essentially all parameters to our desire. However, there are limitations. For example, if we want to study children's behavior, then children's behavior in the lab will be non-natural compared to their behavior in the playground in their own kindergarten. So generally speaking, when we conduct research in the lab, it involves experimental research that requires us to manipulate parameters quite extensively. On the other hand, we could also conduct research on the field in everyday settings. The benefits of doing research on the field will be that the participants' behaviors will be much natural than their behaviors in the lab. There are also limitations, of course. For example, some studies you have to do it on the field. And for example, if you want to evaluate the stars, the galaxy, the black hole, then you better go outside on the field and take out your telescope. As a result, for studies on the field, generally speaking, it's descriptive research. Research can be divided into two broad types. The first type is basic research, where it does not have direct application to treatment. Within basic research, there are two subcategories. The first category is experimental research, where researchers would manipulate parameters extensively together with controlled conditions. The second subcategory is descriptive research, where researchers would simply observe and describe participant behaviors or their surroundings. The second broad type of research is applied research that is aimed to solve specific clinical problems. And apparently, the applied research is focused on treatment. Some research in CSD combines these approaches. Here, let's compare the two subcategories of basic research. The experimental research predicts and tests hypotheses. And in experimental research, control conditions are critical, although they are not always possible. Also, experimental research usually involves multiple variables, and the experimenter would manipulate multiple parameters in a study. For example, we could study the effect of word length on word repetitions for preschoolers. The other side is descriptive research. It's a kind of naturalistic and observational research. This kind of research is not necessarily tightly controlled. But however, it still involves looking at associations or relations between variables. The experimenters doesn't necessarily have the ability to manipulate the variables. They most of the time just observe and describe what happened. For example, if I hide behind a bush, watching preschool boys and girls and see how their behavior differ during their playtime in kindergarten during recess, then that would be a descriptive study. Another example is, let's say a father is collecting drawings of her daughter since the daughter was, say, 7 years old. And because the father loved the daughter so much, whenever the daughter draws something, the father treats it as a wonderful masterpiece. So the father simply collects all his daughter's drawings and put it in a drawer. Now the daughter is 20 years old. On her 20 years birthday party, the father simply displayed all the daughter's drawings in series. The father is not an artist. He doesn't know how to draw. He doesn't teach his daughter how to draw. He doesn't influence his daughter in any sense. He simply collects his daughter's drawings and displays it over time. What kind of study the father just finished? You guessed it. It's a descriptive research because the father does not manipulate anything. He simply observes and describes. Now let's talk about treatment research. Treatment research is also experimental, and it is aimed for treatment. Treatment research must be well designed with control conditions, and the results must be repeatable. A variety of clinical research has been designed and carried out. Many of them are done to establish effectiveness of certain treatment applications. For example, does this treatment produce positive change in participants' behavior? Or is treatment A better than treatment B? And so on. Now let's talk about effectiveness of treatment. Conclusions are based on the degree of experimental control. For example, if we document positive changes in participants' behavior while the participants receive treatment in routine professional settings, then such positive change in participants' behavior will be a weak statement because there is no control condition to prove that. On the other hand, if we document positive changes in participants' behavior or health under controlled experimental conditions, such statement will be a strong statement on the effectiveness of that treatment because we have controlled conditions to back up and to prove that the effects are truly coming from the experimental conditions and parameters. Here are the 5 steps in research. They are also parts of a research study. The first step is introduction. In the introduction, you will define the problem. You will state what is the problem and what is its importance. And then you followed by a research question and hypothesis. The second portion is method. In the method, you will describe what tasks you will do in what procedures. You basically do your science and collect data. The third portion is results. In the results, you organize your data and create your database. You analyze your data. You may even run some stats and get some inferential implications. And then you would organize your results in a table or on a graph. The fourth portion is discussion. These are usually you would compare your results with your hypothesis, whether the results you obtained are consistent with your hypothesis or not. It's also a common practice that you are expected to compare your results with literature. What portion of your results are the same with the literature, and what portions of your results are different from the literature, and make a discussion from there. The fifth portion is conclusion. Based on all you have obtained, you will make appropriate conclusions. These 5 steps in research, or 5 parts of a research study: introduction, method, results, discussion, and conclusion, are the 5 portions you have to remember. Because in this class, at the end of this semester, each one of you will be required to write a research paper. And this is the structure that I want you to follow. In your reflection research paper, you must organize your paper in these 5 portions. Now let's talk about how to state a problem. Usually the purpose of the study is initiated with the statement of the problem, the importance of the problem, followed by a research question and a specific hypothesis. There is no right way or wrong way to ask questions or hypotheses. It all depends on whichever method that makes sense to you. However, a well-written statement of problem, research question, and hypothesis usually will include the independent variables and dependent variables. That is, when you read the statement of the problem, you intuitively will understand what will be the IVs and what will be the DVs. Now let's talk about study design. The first kind is called within subject design. This kind of design usually compares results among participants who are within the same group. For example, if you conduct a study and recruit only college freshmen, then that will be a within subject design. The second kind is a between subject study design. This kind of study design usually compares results between different groups of participants. For example, if you conduct a study and you have 2 groups of participants, say American freshmen versus Chinese freshmen, and if you compare results between the 2 groups of participants, that will be a between subject design. The third kind is a mixed study design. This design compares results within and between groups of participants. For example, if you conduct study that recruit American freshmen and Chinese freshmen, and you compare results not just within each group, but also between the 2 groups, then your study will be a mixed study design. Now let's conduct the in-class activity 1 to experience on how to create and design a research study.